Hey y'all, welcome to Paige's Perspective, where I help you find your inner strength to cope with life. Let's talk about something that seems helpful on the surface, but might actually be hurting our peace. Self-monitoring with trackers. Yeah, this Paige's Perspective is going to be a little bit different than what I typically go to, but I think it'll be helpful. So hear me out. Tracking your sleep, logging every meal, measuring your workouts, scheduling your downtime. At some point it stops being empowering and it starts being exhausting. And I get it. Awareness is important, but there's a fine line between helpful structure and anxious obsession. What if we're trying so hard to control the output that we're actually making ourselves more anxious in the process? What if the constant need to optimize everything, our recovery, our mood, our routines, is actually pulling us further from our natural ability to feel what we need in the moment? Somewhere along the way, we stopped trusting ourselves to know what's good for us without an app or chart or a tracker or whatever to prove it. We've replaced intuition with data points. But your body already knows when it's tired. Your mind already tells you when something is off. You don't always need a tracker to validate what your nervous system already knows. Sometimes the most grounded thing you can do is not measure it, but experience it. Move because it feels good and you know it's necessary for survival. Sleep because you're tired. Eat because you're hungry, not because your ring said that your recovery score is so low or whatever it is that it's telling you that you need to do. The goal isn't to become a perfectly managed robot. It's to become a more present human version of yourself. So if the tracking is helping, great. But if it's making you feel like you're constantly behind, not doing enough, or failing at life, maybe it's time to log out and tune back in. So I used to wear an Apple Watch and I got rid of it maybe 3 years ago. Actually, I think it's a little bit longer than that. I don't know specifically when it was. I just remember it being more harmful to my mental health than actually helpful. I hear people get really frustrated with themselves when they forget to press play on their watch for a workout, and then they are completely discouraged because it didn't track. And that's not a life that I wanted to live. It's very liberating to remove the gadgets, the apps, the tracking, the fucking technology that is supposed to be helpful, but typically isn't long-term. We lose touch with our instincts and ourselves when we rely on outside technology to tell us what we need to know. That's not empowering, and it doesn't help us learn to trust ourselves. Now, look, I'm not judging you if it's something that is really meaningful for you. I'm just throwing out my experience and how helpful it is to learn to go with the flow and trust ourselves again. I don't need a watch to tell me my heart rate is up. I can feel it inside me. I don't need an app to tell me when, my calories are on point or they're off point. I can listen to my body. I can feel things. Now, listen, structure is important in the beginning of learning something new and how to train your brain for new habits, but it isn't best when used long term. We live in a society where we want someone or something to tell us what to do, but in order to really gain knowledge from anything, we need to make our own decisions. We need to feel it. Self-monitoring can be done without all the gadgets, without all the apps, the watches, the rings, all of the things out there that they offer us. We've been sold the idea that gadgets know us better than we know ourselves. That a ring, a watch, or dashboard can tell us how we feel. But here's the thing. Self-monitoring was never meant to be outsourced to technology. It's an internal process. We get lost in numbers because it feels safer to measure than to actually feel. Safer to track data than to sit with the discomfort. But real self-awareness doesn't come from a screen. It comes from checking in, not checking boxes, from journaling, moving your body intuitively, talking it out, having conversations, crying if you need to, or just noticing without needing to optimize. Like we don't need another chart. We need to listen. For those of us coming out of trauma, especially relational trauma, we often crave control. Monitoring our sleep, our food, our steps, our heart rate, it gives us a false sense of safety. Like if we can just track everything, we can prevent chaos from happening again. But trauma recovery isn't about, perfect control. It's about rebuilding trust within ourselves. And you can't do that through a gadget. Healing happens when we stop outsourcing our self-awareness and start tuning back into our body, our emotions, our voice, journaling, moving when it feels right, naming what we feel. That's the kind of self-monitoring that actually heals, not the kind that tells you that your recovery score is 72 today. So instead of learning to feel your way through, you start living by numbers and algorithms. Instead of asking, what do I need right now? You ask, what does my ring say I need? And for trauma survivors, that reinforces the same pattern you're trying to break. Looking outside of yourself for permission, validation, or direction. Over time, this can increase anxiety because it creates dependency on external tools rather than building internal safety. And when the numbers don't match how you feel, it makes you doubt yourself all over again. And we can spiral so quickly when that happens. Real healing is about coming back home to your own internal signals. It's learning to say, I'm tired without needing a device to back you up. It's knowing when something is off, even if your chart says you're fine. That's why in Independently Strong and TUFO, we offer structure, but not the kind that tells you what to do every second of your life. We're not here to give you another system to depend on. We're here to help you rebuild your own. Our framework isn't about making you perform recovery or memorize steps. It's about helping you reconnect with your instincts, to stop asking, what would so-and-so do? And start asking, what do I know is right for me? Yes, we give you tools. Yes, we guide you, but everything we do is built around helping you get strong enough to trust yourself again, because healing from relational trauma isn't about outsourcing your power. It's about reclaiming it. And let me be clear here. Tracking isn't evil. For a lot of people, it does help at first, especially if you're coming out of chaos, betrayal, or emotional confusion. Tracking can create a sense of stability. It gives your brain something to focus on, something that makes life feel a little more manageable. But here's the catch. Tracking is a short-term tool. It's not a long-term solution. Eventually, if you want to truly heal, you have to move beyond the numbers and rebuild trust with your own internal compass. Because if you stay stuck in constant monitoring, counting every hour of sleep, every mood fluctuation, every workout, you're still depending on external systems to validate what you feel inside. But here's the hard truth. When your sense of safety depends on a screen or a ring or a chart or a watch, it's not real safety. It's borrowed. It's conditional. And that's not freedom. That's just another cage. That's why our program is structured, but not controlling. It's not about telling you what to do. It's about helping you unlearn the need to be told. We guide you back to you, to your gut, your boundaries, your truth, who you are, because that's the kind of self-monitoring that actually lasts. If you're interested in the program we offer, you can get 75% off using code Wheelies75 at independentlystrong.com. Now, you know what's wild is that we've been taught that being prepared for everything is the goal. That if we can plan it, we can track it, manage it, we'll be okay. But sometimes being overly prepared is just anxiety in disguise. Going with the flow is actually more empowering because it means you trust yourself to handle whatever comes, even if you didn't plan for it. That's real power. Not in having every hour tracked, every outcome predicted, but in being able to say, whatever happens, I'll be okay. I know how to show up for myself now. That's the shift we're trying to help you make. It's not about building the perfect system. It's about building self-trust. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by all the tracking, the planning, the measuring, and managing, just know this. You don't need another app to tell you how you're doing. You don't need a spreadsheet to prove you're healing. You don't need to control every outcome to live a good, grounded, meaningful life. You need presence. You need trust. You need space to feel what's real and respond to it with compassion, not calculation. And the beautiful thing is, those skills, they don't come from gadgets. They come from you. You've had wisdom in you this whole time. Our job is to just help you hear it again. So put the tracker down if you need to, take a deep breath and remind yourself, I already know what I need. I just need to trust it. For me, tracking is exhausting. Life is already crazy and chaotic. I had to learn to go with the flow and trust myself instead of relying on something else to tell me how to live and how to feel. Another thing is that we actually have less resilience when we depend on external validation from gadgets. We feel completely helpless if the tracker goes down or offline. Like, it can create anxiety because we are so dependent on something external. We got to go back to the basics and trust our internal compass. It's there for a reason. So I want to challenge you this week. For 1 week, pick one thing you usually track: your sleep, your steps, your calories, your mood, and stop tracking it. Instead, check in with yourself. Take your watch off for a week. If you feel anxiety from removing it, you may be dependent on it, and that's not reality. Each day, ask yourself, how do I actually feel right now? What does my body need? What would I choose if I trusted myself more? Journal it, voice memo it. Just notice what comes up when there's no app telling you if you're doing it right. Let this week be the week that you trade measurement for your intuition. Because healing isn't about getting it perfect. It's about learning to hear your own voice again. So that's all I have for this week. Until next time, I'm Paige. Bye.